All right, everybody, welcome to Talking Investing. As always, not financial advice. Today, we are going to talk about Bitcoin, the Bitcoin miners, and a lot of other stuff. And we have a special guest with us, Anthony Powers. So I'm just going to take 1 second and throw it over to you, Anthony, if you want to just say hello, introduce yourself. I'm sure a lot of our audience already is very familiar with you. But for those who aren't, if you want to just say hello and let people know who you are and what you do.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tom. I've been in the space for about 3 years now, by mistake originally. I think it was towards the end of COVID when we were all really bored. I started investing in some of the UK stocks, being a UK resident. Being an accountant from a background, I spent 25 years of my life in the military, most of that service as an accountant. So I was an accountant in the military, qualified in the army, and enjoyed my service. Came out the army, worked in lots of countries, Kazakhstan in the oil industry as a chief finance officer for a company there, and retired about 6 years ago. So really it was like in retirement, took early retirement because of Kazakhstan, and just wondering what to do. So my Twitter side literally started September 21, did my first tweet then, and it just sort of it just grew very quickly, and people enjoyed it, so you just do a little bit more. I haven't been paid for any of the analysis I've done over 2 years. I don't have a YouTube channel where maybe I could monetize it that way. I'm looking at maybe in the future doing something, because you can't just keep doing everything and not paying the phantom to pay the bills with. So I'm looking at various options at the moment, and hopefully come out with some announcements early in 2024 as to what that might look like, and hopefully be something good in the space. 18 months ago, a company in America called Compass Mining came to me and asked me if I'd like to write articles. And I said, "You're joking, aren't you? I'm an accountant. I don't write articles." And they said, "Look, we've seen what you do on Twitter. Just convert that into an article, and we'll pay you for it." And I'm like, "Really?" And I started writing articles, and I think we've just published the 60th article now. So that's grown and grown. So, and they're all Bitcoin mining related. Everything I do on Twitter is Bitcoin mining. I don't tell you what I had for breakfast. I don't tell you what I'm doing tomorrow. It's all Bitcoin mining, and generally a lot of analysis goes in there, and people enjoy it. So, that keeps me spurred on. The motivation to keep going and growing something, hopefully into something that's worthwhile in the future.
Yeah, it's nice to have. I know everybody has their different experiences on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it now, but you've provided a lot of high quality content, and that's nice. And it seems like there's a real group or community forming with Bitcoin mining investors, and a lot of the Bitcoin mining companies, a lot of management, the CEOs, etc., are involved. They're not behind the curtain somewhere hiding. So it's grown. It's growing. I think we're still early, but it's definitely growing. And so 60 articles, that's a lot, and obviously you've got a strong following over on Twitter, and like you said, we do have a bit of a similar background in that we come at this from an accountant standpoint. Hopefully, we bring more than just that piece of the puzzle, but that there's a bias there, and a level of training to go through the data. So you're right. I mean, oftentimes our data can be sometimes a mirror of each other. So
absolutely,
nobody agrees on everything, identically, but we're coming from the same fundamental place. So all right. Well, I just want, this last 2 weeks in particular, there has just been an onslaught of data. So news releases, press releases, we get our monthly updates. That's one of the things, and I know you do a lot of reporting. You put out reports related to the monthly updates and that kind of stuff. And it's one of the things that I like about the Bitcoin mining space. It really, draws me in as an accountant to be able to really, get a quantifiable monthly update. So thank you for all the work you do on putting information out regarding that. But, with that said, we have, I'm going to start out with Marathon. For me, Marathon and Bitfarms were the two first on my radar. there's really been a group that started to separate itself. So I'm gonna start out with Marathon. They just put out their monthly operational report, and there was some stuff in there that I thought was interesting. So I'm just gonna ask you, what was your take on, they put their production out, but they talked about a lot more than that. What's your thoughts on Marathon?
I mean, one thing we can say now is that the 23 exahash has been achieved. I mean, that's probably been talked about for the last 18 months, and that goal to get to 23 exahash, and people were saying, in 2022, they're going to get there that year, and it's been a journey for them. It's not been, all at their, faults. There's been issues with trying to get energy contracts in place, but now that Garden City has gone live and energized, that extra four exahash of machines that were already plugged in months ago, they've lit up, and we've got 23.1 in North America. On top of that, the UAE joint venture, that's going ahead very nicely. They're already up to 2.5 exahash there, and plan to get to the full 7 exahash in early January. So, literally in the next month, there's another 4.5 exahash being plugged into the UAE. That gives them a 20% stake in that. So that's another 1.4 exahash. So you're getting close to that 25 exahash target for this year. And then they've got another 5 exahash target, and they've already started mining in Paraguay. So, that's we've seen Bitfarms go into South America with operations in Paraguay and Argentina. And I remember when they first started talking about that, and many people were coming out and talking about the political stability of those countries down there, and whether Bitcoin mining would work, whether there was some unrest, and any political change could change the whole dynamics. But we've seen Bitfarms grow. We're now seeing Marathon go into Paraguay, and we'll see them grow there. I was very fortunate to have some time with Fred Thiel in Dubai, so I managed to have a chat with him in Dubai. And they're looking at operations, around the world. I mean, Marathon recently visited with some senior people in the team there, Africa, at a number of locations in Africa. So they're taking that very seriously. So they're doing everything. And the thing about Bitcoin mining is these miners now are prepared to travel. These miners will go into other countries and start looking at what operations on there, look for the cheap energy, look for the green renewable energy, because that's another key factor as well now. It's not about going down the carbon, and using, coal, oil and gas, looking for the renewables, looking for hydro, looking for some miners using nuclear, and they're prepared to move. And the world is their oyster. If you'd have said to me 6 months ago, there's mining going to happen in the UAE or the Middle East, I'd be saying that's the last place on earth, because the temperatures are so high. Having lived in those locations with the military before, why would you mine in a country where the average temperature during the summer is 40 to 50 degrees centigrade? It's just ridiculous. But the immersion cooling technology allows the miners to do that, and they have, the UAE is, yes, it's so hot during the summer, and they need an enormous amount of electricity, so they need an enormous amount of power. But at the evenings and in the winter, that power is not required. So there's an automatic, grid imbalance, only meeting the requirement when the temperature cools off. So during the evening, during the winter, Bitcoin miners can go in there and actually utilize that power. So they've proved they can go into like the most extreme locations, and we'll see more of that for Marathon. I expect to hear some news in the next month or so of a substantial order going forward, just like we've seen from some of the other miners. I'm sure we'll talk about those in a second as well.
The next generation of miners is out now. And I'm going to be interested to see, we have seen monumental orders put in. So it's going to be on the manufacturers all of a sudden to get, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of machines if you add it all up. But I do think a lot of, Bitfarms in particular just came out and said several times, we're not buying the XPs, not because it's not a good machine, but like you said, they focused on, they had to reduce their debt. I know a lot of my followers, and one of the biggest comments I've gotten over the year, and I think only now in the last few weeks are some people starting to forgive them. They went out and got a loan and bought some Bitcoin. And obviously, that did not work out as planned, and things happen. So, I think they addressed that quickly, and like you've said, they really pivoted very fast to say, you know what, we got to get rid of this debt. It's not about 2022 is not going to be about growth, and they did do some growth, but I think there was a big pivot. They skipped the XP.
Yeah.
So let me ask you in specific about Bitfarms, because they just put out, until the several came out after that, the press release Bitfarms put out last week, I was floored. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's just puts them effectively in that top tier of miners, really. I mean, they're a mid-tier miner. But for me at the moment, if you look at operating, so I look at what, who seems to do month on month gets the most out of their mining machines. Bitfarms tend to do it month after month, every month. I think out of the 11 months this year, they've probably finished top in terms of Bitcoin per exahash in 9 of those months. Hive are very close as well. Hive always, and Hive have been good for a few years, that they vie for that top. They were top in 2021, probably most of 2022, but Bitfarms have really sort of taken over in 2023. It's literally every month. You'll occasionally see a miner that has a freakish month where they, maybe a DMG finishes like top when they're generally 6th or 7th in the table, and you don't understand why. But, all I can say for Bitfarms is at 7 o'clock on the first working day of the month, their update comes out every month. So Ben Gagnon, he gets that update out. He doesn't care what other people are writing their updates. Their update out is the first update I've received in the last 2.5 years since I've been doing this properly, every month. No other miner can, I don't know if it's like a race for them, but they just get it out in a front. And actually, if you think about it, they have 95% of the data until the last day. It's on the last day's mining they need to add to that update. They can write the update before that. But actually, in fair play to Bitfarms, they've let the audience know. And I know it's an area that if there was one thing you could sort of like be slightly critical of Bitfarms, it's the fact that they have got probably an aging fleet and their efficiency was at 35 when their competitors were sort of probably closer to 25. This new order that we saw in that update puts them firmly back in that sort of in the sort of 18, below 20 in terms of of efficiency. So that's a fantastic move for them. And as I say, it's been a great teamwork from the whole team at Bitfarm to get to where they were to where they are today. Very impressive.
So I agree. I think Ben is, and he's out in front maybe more than some of the other technical guys in the background. But they're operationally, they've been spectacular all along. Like you said, this year they are somewhere around first place every month from an efficiency standpoint. And one of the things that jumped out at me in that press release was they talked about getting from, I think, 6.3 to 12 exahash and then to 17 exahash. They even mentioned 21. I think you got to do some math gyrations to get there, but it looks to me like they're going to pretty much replace the vast majority of their fleet. Yes. So like you said, these 35, being at 35 joules per terahash pre-halving already was leading to a pretty expensive cost per coin. At the halving, that just will not do. So, but I think they're going to pretty dramatically decrease their cost per coin.
I think the 17 exahash is a firm growth target. And the difference between 17 and 21 is actually the miners that they're replacing. So if they were to maintain plugging some of those miners in, that gives them an extra 4 exahash. Now, the team at Bitfarms have got decisions to make whether they can, they are still, valuable to, another miner elsewhere who wants to, who might want to start up, their own mining business, or someone come in and purchase them. They have got to value those miners. They're not going to be, they've been mining great Bitcoin up to now, and even though the hash rate, the global hash rate, it hit 640 yesterday, it's back down into sort of like 500 territory now, but it's still, the global hash rate is still 100% up this year from January. Bitfarms have got 4 exahash that they can repurpose them or sell them and bring in more hash rate that way. So I think the 17 is very achievable, and like you say, they've already got some value to get to 21 with what they get for the miners they're going to sell or repurpose.
And I do think, like you said, it takes them from that middle tier, and there's a bunch in there to, they're not going to be mine more Bitcoin than everybody, but they're cemented in the top 5, I think, at this point, and maybe some months better. So,
and if you think about their setup there, Tom, they're I don't think there's many miners as widely spread out as Bitfarms as well. They operate in 4 countries. They've got 11 locations. So it's not like a Whinstone facility where everything's in one place, you know, so you're having to manage. But what it does show you, and, you know, it shows you, like, again, you know, miners will move to where they can source energy. And it doesn't have to be big elements of energy. It could be 50 megawatts here. It could be 30 megawatts there. They'll source that out and they'll do the analysis, the return on investment, or whatever the calculations. And if it's a viable option, then they'll go and do that. And Bitfarms, you know, and a number of other miners have done that as well. So
I think a lot of miners are starting to. You mentioned Marathon is really spreading out, and they have the resources to do so. Bitfarms, I kind of feel like they led the way in that, and to some extent, some of this, and I'll ask you, I really think Marathon is doing a lot of this. It's a little bit of dipping your toe in the water. Okay, like you said, you know, it's a little counterintuitive to set up gigantic Bitcoin mining in the UAE, but, you know, with immersion cooling, maybe that's going to work. So now they've got a joint venture. They're going to get 1.4 exahash out of that. Do you think they're going to, you know, are they going to continue? I heard Fred talk a lot on the conference call about this joint venture business model. The thought crossed my mind, you know, are they going to kind of test the waters in a bunch of different places in a joint venture manner and then move in on their own? Or do you think they're going to stick to this joint venture business model?
I think the Paraguay is also a joint venture. So in Paraguay, it's a joint venture, but actually Marathon have the major stake in that joint venture. So I 100% believe that, you know, they will look for value in doing things in certain areas.
People need to look at the big picture. And I think that's true for Bitcoin mining. As you said, it's going to, you know, go other places around the world. And places like Africa, there's going to be places I know that struggle to have any energy at all right now, that, you know, something like, you know, a Bitcoin mining facility could start to bring energy to places that are struggling.
I mean, if you look, I mean, and you mentioned Africa there, and that's, you know, it's a great point. And again, it's like, you know, I'm thinking, you know, Africa, what, you know, how would miners operate in Africa again with, you know, the heat there, and you know, but actually, Africa's got an enormous amount of hydropower, and what you find is the power that's created is massively more than the power required. So, you know, you have these villages, and they don't need a great deal of power. So, you know, a Bitcoin miner going into those areas and setting up infrastructure and mining Bitcoin, that money goes straight back into those communities and helps the communities, because if they weren't there, they'd be soldering on without them sort of, you know, that resource coming through. So that's a sort of a positive story. You know, Africa's, you know, apparently it's got like 10% of the global hash rate. So it's growing quite steadily, just in the same way, you know, 2 years ago when China turned off, the US sort of grew, and the US has grown to be the biggest, you know, the biggest continent now, or the biggest country now with the largest, you know, hash rate as such. But yeah, it's interesting.
I think it's important that the hash rate gets spread around a little bit more. I know there was almost like when China did shut down, there was a flight to the U.S. in a major way, and that's good. But you know, Fred mentioned in specific on his conference call that, you know, they were looking to maybe ultimately be 50-50 in the U.S. outside of the U.S. So, you know, it's probably going to take them a while to get to that point. But yeah, there's a lot of Bitcoin is hydropowered, and, you know, that's a piece that gets lost. And like you're talking about, a lot of this hydro energy is either stranded or wasted, you know, and it's not. So these are opportunities to take advantage of stuff that's not, you know, it's 100% green, or, you know, whatever percent you want to say that approaches 100%, and it's bringing benefit to communities. So I think all those things are good things. Riot recently, right? I'm losing track of the days, but they just put out, you know, I thought Bitfarms blew my mind. I've never seen anything like the press release that Riot just put out. What are your thoughts on what they've got in store?
Well, here's a little fun fact for you. So if you go into Jason Leslie's biography, his background, actually, I'm not sure if it was a hobby or actually, he was a professional poker player. And he actually, you know, earned money playing poker professionally. And yesterday when I saw that update, I could just see all the chips in Riot going, we're all in. That's it. We're all in. We've set the marker for everyone else to follow. I mean, and you're right, Bitfarms, you know, where did that, I mean, 10x hash, no one's expecting an update like that. You know, when a miner is put in an order for more than the hash rate that they currently have. That's an enormous step. That's an enormous
staggering
step. And they put they've got a 18 exahash for just under 300 million, and it's around about $15-16 a terahash. So they've got a really, really good price. I mean, go back to November, December 2021, not too far away, 2 years ago. I can name 3 or 4 miners that were paying $80 a terahash on sort of like S19s. Right. These are the state-of-the-art S21s. Or sorry, not these are the state-of-the-art micro BT machines. But even the likes of CleanSpark, Bitfarms, and all the others have bought their machines, their T21s, around about the $14-15 as well. So those prices are really, really good at the moment for the miners to operate in. But, the last line of their update was like, we have an option to purchase an extra 75 million exahash. And I'm like, I just literally went, that's a misprint. It's got, is it another 7.5? And it's not, and then it said after that, this will take our self-mining to over 100 exahash. And I thought, that's it. That they've just gone all in. That is, you can't future-proof the organization any more than that. And they don't, they're not doing updates every day of the week. And I think people have sort of like looked at Riot this year, and they have struggled in terms of, they had 2 facilities at Windstone that have been out of action since December last year with the weather storm. So their immersion cooling technology facilities were both out of action. They're now starting to come online. It'd be interesting to see their update for November to see if their hash rates increase a little bit. It did increase in October, maybe a little bit more in November. And then hopefully by the end of December, they get that effectively 2 exahash back of immersion cooling. Gives them a good start into 2024. Then got the 7.5 exahash that they ordered a few months ago, which will be the starting point for Corsicana. And then this other order will get them to like 400 megawatts at Corsicana. So, it looks like it's all, I sort of questioned, we didn't get enough updates of when the miners were coming in, but, they just saved the best for last, really. And it was mind blowing. I saw the update come out yesterday, and I retweeted it straight away thinking this is awesome. And, highlighted every good point in that tweet. It was a really good announcement. And I was on, I managed to have a call with Jason today, and, just said it took my breath away. It really did. Not many updates have that much of an impact, but that certainly was one. And to be honest, I don't think it was getting the recognition that it probably deserved yesterday. It didn't see it was getting picked up everywhere. I mean, when Bitfarms announced their increase in hash rate, it was like everyone was putting information out there. Whether there's an expectation that Riot can just do this, but it still takes a team effort to get that sort of deal done. It's not done in a conversation over a cup of coffee. There'll probably been some long conversations of how they're going to do this, how they're going to pay for it. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of the finances, but we do know that the miners who bought from Bitmain, and this has never, ever happened before in purchasing, are able to pay 20% a year after delivery. I'll tell you now, and I know how it normally happens. There's usually, if you're buying machines, you'll pay a deposit round about 35%. You'll then pay 35% over a number of months before delivery. You'll then pay 30% a month before delivery. So you paid all the money a month before delivery, and then you get delivery of the miners. Bitmain have allowed 20% to be paid a year after delivery. Now, obviously, CleanSpark went in there and got a good deal, and then Iris Energy also got the same deal, and other miners have gone in and also managed to negotiate that as well. So maybe that opportune moment there, that has highlighted to other miners, now's the time to start thinking about getting our act in order, because it looks like the rates are good and the opportunities to finance with those rates make it look manageable as well. Because you can get a 20% delay for a year, hopefully through the halving. No one's going to say the Bitcoin price rises on the day of the halving, but it might rise a number of months after the halving, as it has done in previous cycles. I don't know what it's going to do, but I can look at previous cycles and say there's an expectation it might go up after the halving, but it might be 4 or 5 months later. That gives these miners the opportunity for the Bitcoin price to rise and then repay some of that cost later on.
Yeah, those were spectacular terms. And the other thing that's really taken me by surprise, the last time around, the bottleneck seemed to be the Bitcoin mining machines. And I think because things were so much, the global network was so much smaller, we hadn't had these mass scale purchases in Bitcoin mining machines. And like you were talking about, there were people paying, you know, 3-4 times the price of what's happening right now. So to me, you know, the one of the narratives with Bitcoin miners has been, you know, it's so it's so, you know, the capex intensive with having to replace all these machines. But you know, if you can replace these at $14-15 a terahash, these are much better machines, and I think they're going to have a little longer lifespan than people think. It does change the numbers around a lot, so I've been really impressed. This is not it's not the financially, it's not the biggest piece of the puzzle anymore, and it doesn't seem to be the bottleneck. Although with this many orders in, I will be interested to see how it's really 2 companies that are on the hook for an awful lot of deliveries over the next 12 to 18 months, and the next 6 months. A lot of these are promised in. So we'll see how those come at us. Only time will tell.
Yeah.
I always like to mention, I think everything takes a little bit longer than you know, first anticipated. So when I read these, to me, I always tack on some kind of 10% or whatever the case may be, additional time. So I won't be disappointed if everybody's one step off, but you know, are they going to be able to match that, or are we going to turn into a situation where some of these miners get held up? Do you have any thoughts on that, or is it just a wait and see situation?
I think if you look at 2022, because we haven't reached the end of 2023 yet, the only miner I can remember that actually met its growth target in 2022 was CleanSpark.
Right.
And they were online to reach their 16 exahash by then this year, until recently, and they realized that, you know, the facilities that they're currently doing at the moment is going to take a few weeks longer. So it's going to be early January or February when they get those miners actually switched on. So, you know, if it's, I mean, the expectation, if it's a month delay, then I think, you know, we can live with that. I mean, the difficulty is we had those graphs by Marathon. We had those graphs by Marathon saying what their hash rate was going to be, and it was very clear in the graphs. You know, all these data points there. You know, we're going to be at 5 exahash by December, 7 by January, and it just never materialized. And they were on the back foot. I remember Fred had flown the miners in from China, not even put them on shipping containers, to make sure they got to the US. And so you know, expectation, you know, is an issue. But I think what mining companies should be doing is managing the expectation by putting an update out there saying, you know, we really try to get, you know, by December, but you know what, it's going to be, you know, January or first 2 weeks in February, because this and this is what is just the bottleneck at the moment. I think actually, if you can communicate that, you know, sensibly to shareholders, not on the day that it's expected, but give them some notice. And I think CleanSpark have managed that communication quite well, actually. So, you know, we were told, you know, I think it was a couple of months ago that the end of the year was probably, you know, a few weeks earlier than they believe they could do. So it's now, I think it's back to February now, but I like what I see. They put plenty of updates about the facility, how it's being done as well. And in the same way, Iris Energy, again, give regular updates about the change in the facility, how it's growing. So they get their extra 80 megawatts out there, fill that with miners, gets them to sort of 9 or 10 exahash, and they've got another 500 megawatts of power available to start building out as and when they want it. So it's managing expectation, managing communication. We don't want communication every day of the week. We saw that with some miners back in 2021, where the CEO was coming on, like, you know, YouTube and answering questions every week, and you know, shareholders will start getting used to that. You know, they'll want that, and this, you know, if he doesn't turn up the next week, it's like, where is he? You know, we were expecting a call and answering all our 50. You know,
something must be wrong.
About managing the right level of communication, and I think what we've got in the space now with all the miners, they're starting to really do that, and I think they look to other miners to see what the peer miners are doing in terms of communication, and they're all sort of, you know, following a lead here and saying, well, that works. I'm going to, you know, and I go back to the updates. The updates have really come alive, and you're seeing it's very few miners now. I can name a couple of miners that just put a small update out, but actually most of the miners put out a reasonable amount of update with you satisfied your thirst for knowledge by reading what they've put out there. So, you know, I think it's a good place to be in. Was just, you know, if this is the start of a bull market, that's going to be fantastic going forward like that, because I think with your, I was fortunate to sort of pop in on your channel last week, and I was listening to some of your followers, and again, I go into other groups and I listen to the questions that come out. And I think we're just starting to see some green shoots coming through into the market. People are a bit more happier now. We've had about 18 months of like, when's it going to turn around? But we're starting to see some green shoots. So that's positive, and it might bring new people back into the space and want to understand about, what Bitcoin mining is, what companies mine Bitcoin. And there's people like yourself and Sebastian and me in the space who are sort of, and Bryce from McNally's Money does a very good job on his channel as well, educating people about, what companies do, where to find the information. We're doing this for entertainment, but, people can have a look at what we do as a starting point and then carry on their due diligence into those companies and, and then carry out that analysis before they make any decisions, because, we're not the ones, making their decisions for them. We're just sort of like providing a forum to sort of like let you know what the fundamentals are of these companies. I think we do a reasonably good job of doing that.
Well, I agree, and thank you, and you're definitely a big part of that, and you mentioned a couple other people. Anyway, it's a pretty small group still, so, and it's a pretty new space, so, I think we're all trying as hard as we can to, increase the amount of awareness that, these investments can be. And to some extent, we've seen in the stock price and the movement of some of these stocks in the last week or two or three, there's some eye-popping numbers. I know oftentimes that brings people into the space who might not even know what these companies are, but they're starting to pop up on lists. So, this was up 40% today or 60. We've seen some wild numbers. Which leads me to a question. What is your thought on, we've talked about a lot of the big Bitcoin miners. There's a lot of miners that, let's say less than 2 exahash. What are your thoughts on those miners going into the halving and beyond the halving? Are these, and obviously, I don't expect you to answer specifically and definitively, but, in general, do you have thoughts? Do they have to do something to get from here to there? Or can a Bitcoin mining company that's at 1 exahash or 1.5 exahash, can they make it through the halving and go on to bigger, better things?
I think what's important for any size miner is to effectively try to keep your growth strategy in line with the Bitcoin hash rate growth strategy. So if we looked at the start of the year when it was 250 exahash, the global hash rate, now it's sort of approaching 600. You could say that the growth in exahash is doubled. So has your company's own hash rate effectively doubled in that period? If it hasn't, you're effectively not keeping up with Bitcoin, and that becomes an issue then. There are some very good small miners that operate, but the challenge will be, if for them it's effectively about Bitcoin price. If I look at a smaller miner, and just let's use that, we've got DMG, we've got DigiHost, we've got Sato Technology. How long could they last doing their mining post the halving if the price doesn't increase? If the price increases to 70, 80,000, Tom, we're having a wasted conversation. It might well be that everyone can mine and we saw miners 12 months ago mine at 15,000 when Bitcoin was 15,000. Nobody switched off. You remember? Nobody switched off in December last year. So there is an argument that miners will carry on mining. And what we've seen this year is miners have carried on mining, but there's so much more hash rate. Where is that hash rate coming from? Because it's not coming from North America in terms of, we've not seen the growth this year to the level that it's doubled the global hash rate. So there are machines popping up globally that we're not sort of like, 100% cited on. But we know obviously the power's there because, the hash rate, we have the hash rate indicator that tells us what the global hash rate is. But going back to my view is it's going to be a challenge, but if their operations are good and they have good margins, there's every reason that they can last, a certain period through the halving. But it goes back to, how long is that runway for them? These smaller miners won't have, 50, $60 million of cash reserves. They might have 1 or 2 million. And they might have a small Bitcoin hodl, maybe 30, 40 Bitcoin. How long does that last the organization going through? I think some of the smaller miners that I cover, and I know you cover as well, I think, we saw DMG today put a big order in for S21s. that to me says they've done some analysis on what to expect, and they're sort of like, they're going in there and saying we want to be part of that hash rate growth as well. And so, it'll be interesting times. But yeah.
Well, I know that, and that I think that was a spot on analysis. This all has to do with, I try to drive home on the channel. It's all about cash. I mean, I know we're both accountants by nature, but I don't care what your background is. As you're looking at these companies, if you don't have the cash runway, if you don't have the cash to get from point A to point B, I don't care how good you are at doing what you're doing, you're just not going to get there. And like you said, so for that group of miners, not so much the ones we talked about, there's 6 or 8 or maybe even 10 miners that, the price of Bitcoin at the halving, in my opinion, doesn't make a big difference. But there's that other half that for those miners, like you're talking about, maybe 60,000, 70,000 price of Bitcoin would make a world of difference. And it may make the difference between, survival. And I would note that both Fred from Marathon and Matt from CleanSpark on their conference calls said they anticipate opportunities to, accumulate some of these smaller miners. They didn't really, call anybody out by name, obviously, but it seemed like they were talking about.
I was sat in a conference in London in 2022. So in April 2022, it was the AIM Summit in London, and there was about 6-7 miners there. And one of the panels included Ben Gagnon, who I think, is probably one of the smartest people in the space. He can articulate Bitcoin mining probably better than everybody else. He's grown as a Bitcoin miner from a very young age as a child, doing his own Bitcoin mining to grow into being the chief mining officer for one of the largest, North American miners. And so he talked on stage with a number of good panelists about potential merger and acquisition. This was back last year, and they were saying in 2022 this was going to happen. And to be honest, we didn't really see it in 2022. And we saw miners have financial difficulties. We saw Argo blockchain, effectively having built a fantastic facility at Helios, hand it over to Galaxy 6 months later to keep them from effectively going under. And so, they're now they're a hosted miner now in their effectively what was their facility, but they're still going, and there's there's hopefully there's a light at the end of that tunnel. It's going to be a challenge. They're down to 21 Bitcoin. We saw other miners again getting close to, we've seen Core Scientific going to Chapter 11, and Celsius and Celsius assets. There was US BTC going into buying Celsius assets. But we've not really seen, the only merger and acquisition we saw is the recent one with Hut 8 and US BTC, and that was a merger of equals. That wasn't one acquiring the other.
After the crypto winter, we kind of had a Bitcoin miner winter, if you will, for about a 4-month period here in 2023. And I know, most of my
motivation. It's hard through the winter to do what we're doing.
It is, coming off of a crypto winter, going into this, I was counting the weeks. So we got to kind of week 20, and it was like, boy, this has been a tough run. So,
you've carried, hands up to you and Sebastian and Bryce. Myself, I've carried on with the articles, but and we are all interested in this space. We'll have our own mining portfolios, and so that keeps us interested in the space. But it's been a challenge. I mentioned Blonity early in the conversation, and Blonity sort of like left the space for about 18 months because he just wanted to take a break from it. It's the reason a lot of retail investors are involved in Bitcoin mining as opposed to investing in crypto or investing in other types of investments is because the volatility attracts the investors. If you can see a mining stock like Core Scientific went up 75% yesterday. There was another small mining stock, BETS, I think it's called, and that went up over 100%. In a day. That appeals to a certain type of investor. I'm not saying appeals to me because that volatility is serious. I'd like to think after 3 years of doing a lot of analysis, I've got a little bit of an understanding of sort of where the value maybe sits in some of these miners. And I try and keep that, sort of keep that to myself. But it does appeal. Bitcoin has a lower volatility in the Bitcoin miners. So if we say, the Bitcoin volatility may be sort of, a factor of 8%. The Bitcoin mining could be 15 to 20% volatile in comparison. And, that can be bad, but it can be good. But it's very attractive to a certain type of investor who wants to like go in and buy and then quickly sell at an opportune moment and walk away, with a short-term profit. And that's a strategy that works for some people,
For sure. I'm going to bring up something out of left field here, but it's something everybody's anticipating and talking about and debating about. We've got a looming potential Bitcoin spot ETF. So, any thoughts on that as to what it's going to do to Bitcoin? Obviously, as it's obviously an important thing to the Bitcoin miners. I won't ask you to guess when or if, because I won't give an answer to that either. Who knows?
It's a good question, Tom, and I've thought long and hard about it. I mean, I think there's obviously, if it's approved, and then you'll start to see exchange, people have to buy Bitcoin then to satisfy the requirements for the investment. Then that's all well and good for Bitcoin. Does that automatically mean the interest in the retail investors staying with the mining community? That can be looked at two ways. We can still get people coming in because of that volatility, but if an ETF is approved, that gives people an alternative then to actually invest in certain investments that they might want to structure. And so you might actually see a move away from miners, which, is probably not the first thought that people were thinking about. So you have to be very careful. I don't know one way or the other, but I'm saying there are, it could go very well. Obviously, I'd like to think the Bitcoin price would increase because, we have already mined 93% of all the Bitcoin that's ever going to be mined. So if people are saying, well, we only get 450 Bitcoin next year, the level of Bitcoin going forward now is to be honest with you, it's fairly irrelevant. It's about the 93%. That's more relevant. It's going to take another 120 years to mine 7% of the Bitcoin left. So that to me is not a massive deal. It's about, what we got with 93%, how's that's been moving around. So if and we know from data that 70% of Bitcoin has been held in the wallets at least for the last 12 months. So it hasn't moved at all. I can be open. I've been buying Bitcoin for about 2.5, 3 years. I haven't moved any of my Bitcoin since I bought it. It's just stayed in the wallet. I've not sold any of it, not transferred. I've added to it. I receive my payments from Compass in Bitcoin, so that goes into my wallet.
Oh,
so
nice.
that's so if the ETFs are approved, then that because of the supply of Bitcoin that's physically out there, you'd like to think from an economic standpoint that demand will outstrip supply, and therefore price will increase.
So, I mean, I have another 100 questions for you, but I think we've gone over an awful lot of stuff. So maybe we'll leave some more for the next time.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Anthony, for coming on the channel. Anything, just anything big I missed, or any other thoughts that you wanted to let everybody know?
There is one that, and I don't know if you've raised it on your channel, but it's quite interesting. About I'm going to say 2 weeks ago, Bit Digital released an update on their HPC center in Iceland. So if you look at the mining companies that are moving into the sort of HPC, I loosely say IA. They're not going to be providing IA. They're providing high performance computers to be used, for the servers. And so we had the likes of Hive Digital and Hut 8, who had an enormous amount of GPUs from the Ethereum mining, needing to know what they could repurpose those for. So HPC was obviously going to be one of the options they were going to use. And they've both gone down that route there, and they're using the sort of like the momentum of AI to attract sort of like, potential customers. Iris Energy went out and bought $10 million worth of NVIDIA 100 chips. And they're going to create, a HP center probably at the Helios site, the Childress site in Texas. So they've got, a big facility there. They can do that there. Bit Digital came to the party a bit later than those three and made an announcement to say that they were going to the HPC space. However, they went one step further and announced they had a partner with a guaranteed revenue stream for the next 3 years. And they've already received the first year's revenues in advance. So, I don't think that story was picked up as well as it could have been for a miner of BitDigital side to look at getting a revenue stream in that's not linked to the price of Bitcoin as we approach the halving. We've heard about, Hive Digital have got a run rate at the moment of about $1 million a year in AI, as they call it, revenues. BitDigital are going to have significantly more than that. And it just wasn't picked up in the sort of like in the mainstream news. I put a tweet out of it. I spoke to Sam Tabor, the CEO, and it's a very positive story. We want to see some of these miners look at sort of horizontal integration into their industries and providing different revenue streams to help them get through the halving, because who knows what might happen with the Bitcoin price. If you've got $20-30 million coming through for another revenue stream, that's going to help you a little bit. And from what all the other miners have said, the margins on this type of computing are massively greater than Bitcoin mining, significantly greater. So that's why we're seeing a lot of excitement, in this area, because there are some great margins to do. My only concern is it's like, when you talk about AI and you talk about Bitcoin mining, the level and quality of the infrastructure is absolutely, totally, you're comparing apples and oranges. It's, we've seen miners put into, shipping containers and these tier 3 facilities for HPC are a different ball game. And if you look at cost, there's been some cost analysis. If you were to say £1 million for a facility with Bitcoin mining, you'd have to look at 10 million for the same size for HPC. So that's the note I'll finally leave you on. That story wasn't picked up. I sort of like put it out on my Twitter feed just to try and give it some weight. Unfortunately, it got shared around. So it's nice to see miners thinking out the box and then delivering on that thinking out the box. And I think BitDigital should get like a tick in the box for doing that.
I'll be interested. That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. I did do, there's some of the miners like BitDigital, there's not massive interest in out there. I have a smaller group of members, and I did a video for them on that very thing. And I almost posed the question that was such a big announcement from them that I asked myself, are they switching gears almost? It almost seems like they're going to be as much into the high performance computing as they are into the Bitcoin mining. So You're right. That was, if that plays out, if the numbers that they talked about in that press release play out, that's going to be a big piece of their puzzle. So
yeah, I mean, I spoke to Sam, and actually a lot of the revenue has been paid in advance, so it's they've got the money. So that's and they've got the facility. They did it in a really good way. I mean, when they announced they bought the chips, and they said, we are lining up a customer and we will let you know shortly. And 2 weeks later, they notified about the facility that they got, and then a week later there's a customer. It was like they did what they said they were going to do. It's not like, some companies have said, well, we're going to go to the moon on AI, and I'm still waiting for that first customer to come through the door. And I really hope, I hope the likes of Hive, and I hope the likes of Hut 8, get to where they need to get to, and get those revenue streams back on there, get that momentum, get that company spoken about more on your channel and what I do on mine, and what the other guys do, because I feel, watching a lot of content providers, I don't see as many of their names being mentioned as much as they used to be. You can sort of clean spark, Riot, Marathon, Bitfarms. Once you get past those four, Iris Energy, you then sort of like, where's the next, Cypher. But we can go through 6 or 7, and then we're starting to get closer maybe to mentioning Hive and Hut. So if they can turn it around, this merger is going to be interesting for Hut. I think that's the meeting of two different skill sets. USBTC, them guys are entrepreneurs, they're young guys, and you've got Jamie at Hut 8, who's got 20 plus years in the technology space, knows what she's doing. Again, she goes to all the conferences around the world, positively speaking about the Bitcoin mining. So she's selling the industry to every channel that she can do, which is a very positive thing there. and I see her at many of these conferences. So, let's hope that the green shoots start coming out of of those companies that we've mentioned there, because they were the talked about companies 2 years ago. Absolutely.
Well, I hope to see some of them. I know I have been getting in my comments section, wanting to talk about Hive, and it has been a while. I've had, I've had them on the channel. I've had Aiden on the channel and Frank on the channel, but it has been a little while. But now they are starting to have some news, and with the, what everybody's calling AI, but like you talked about with the high performance computing stuff, I've been in a little bit of a wait and see. I think Hut's kind of proven out their model. They bought something that already existed. A lot of the other people are moving into this space. So I'm hopeful, and I think there's a lot of, potential there. But, if we look across the whole spectrum of investing, I know as many people are just trying to throw that tag onto their business as possible. But I do think a lot of the Bitcoin miners are legitimately getting involved in what, like you called high performance computing.
I think it's,
and using the AI title, but
to drive the story. Yeah,
exactly. All right. Well, thank you. That was an excellent extra thought. So
thank you very much, Tom.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the channel, and we'll definitely, if you're interested, we can definitely do this again. So,
been a pleasure. Been a long time waiting to get this put in place, but hopefully people find it interesting and comment that they'd like to see again in the future. But definitely up for it again, Tom. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody drop a comment on, drop something in the comments section. Say hello to Anthony, and if you are not familiar, please go over to Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, and you can see Anthony's handle on the screen, and you can go visit him there. He's got a lot of excellent content, and like he said, it's really hyper focused on the Bitcoin miners, which I know most of the viewers here are as well. So thanks again, Anthony. It was a pleasure. And look forward to doing it again next time.
Thanks very much, Tom.